Hey, Joe. Oh,
Good evening.
hey, Dan. Hey, Joe.
And we will miss you, Tom, in 2 weeks.
2 weeks.
For the meeting with Mark Bobrowski. Welcome, Ann. Ann said she'd be flying in.
Hi, I am. I'm about 2 minutes from my house, so as soon as I get there, I'll get on.
Do we have a volunteer who wants to take minutes for the first couple, at least for the first few minutes?
I should probably volunteer because I've been absent and I have not done it yet. So I will. Is the format like that? Is there a preferred format or just like look at the ones from last week?
You can use the ones from last time. The basic minutes have to have is date, time, location of the meeting by Zoom. Who is present or absent, but typically who's present. If people join, what time they join, and what the general topics of discussion are in it. Any votes that are taken, and if they're by roll call, which they will be, the actual results of those roll calls. I think I've got that down, Pat. Tom, is that correct, accurate?
Oh, yeah, that's good.
Figure if I'm missing anything major, you'll let me know.
Okay.
All right, I'll do my best.
We need one more member to have a quorum so we can officially begin. And the real question is, will Ann get back before we have a quorum? Or
I was just thinking that. I can see
But-
my house, but I have to hook up my computer.
Okay, so with Kevin here, we actually officially do have a quorum. Welcome, everyone. So with that, we will call the meeting to order at 7:02 p.m. by Zoom. Thank you for joining us. Public engagement. That would apply to Tom and Bob or anyone else if they wish to speak from that perspective. Moving on, minutes, February 6th. Welcome, Tim. So Tim is joined at 7:02 as well. So we're just getting started here. So first we have the minutes themselves. Do we have a motion to approve the minutes as presented and posted for our review?
So moved by Ann.
Okay, Anne has made the motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
And Kevin has seconded the motion. You got that down, Lucy? Excellent. You've got this whole minutes thing. You've got the call of the meeting. You've got people joining. You've got Catherine joining at 7:03. You've got this down pat. You won't have any issues. So we've got a motion on the floor to approve the minutes from February 6th, 2023. It's been made by Ann, seconded by Kevin. Any discussion on the minutes themselves as they were written? Seeing no discussion. Since we are remote, we do need to do a roll call. For this, I will do it in the order in which I see you on my screen. So with that, Joe.
Yes.
Lucy,
Yes.
Kevin,
Yes.
Tim,
Yes.
Catherine, you're on mute.
I'm gonna abstain.
Okay. Anne?
Yes.
And I vote yes. So with that, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in the affirmative, 0 in the negative, 1 abstention. Minutes are approved. I will go ahead and put the footer on that they were approved tonight and send them off to town clerk and the town administrator so that they can get posted to the website and be held for review. Okay, that brings us to the next item. So the recodification meetings that we're going to be having with Attorney Bobrowski is item number 4. So Attorney Bobrowski has been, I've had a discussion with him. He's actually really looking forward to working with us. I had a brief discussion just describing Wakefield, and he agrees Wakefield is going to be slightly unique, as are the other 350 communities in the Commonwealth. Each of them presents him with unique challenges. In our case, one of the things that makes Wakefield just a little bit different is the level of involvement that we tend to have by our citizenry in many types of issues, particularly anything that deals with land use. That happens to be his particular area of specialty. So he wants to have effectively 4 different segments of meetings, and he'll explain this at the next meeting. He asks that as many of us that can attend those meetings as possible attend as well, and then he may recommend that there be smaller groups, in which case subcommittees that will meet with him. We will make those decisions as a committee separately. But each of the meetings that he will have will focus on a different area. And that becomes significant so that the areas that each of the meetings will focus on, one will focus on how land gets developed, one will focus on just compliance with existing laws, and the one will focus on just the changes from the existing bylaws. So you're going to take a look at different pieces. And at the first meeting, which is in 2 weeks from tonight, that particular meeting is really to understand who the stakeholders are. And I expect it to be a somewhat large meeting. I have gone ahead and invited lots of people who seem to have expressed a direct interest in the zoning and zoning bylaws by and large. So Joe, you probably already got a notice from on the ZBA side as well. I'd sent a note out to the ZBA asking if they want to have participation, additional people. I've asked the planning board, they expect to have representatives. I've also asked the town planner to join, and a variety of others as well in the community that have expressed direct interest in this topic. So there will likely be members from the Chamber of Commerce, some realtors, and others who just deal with land issues on a regular basis, really as an opportunity for meet and greet. And the meetings will likely be 2 hours long, so it's expected to be from 7 to 9. Otherwise, Attorney Bobrowski seems to be lovely to work with, surprisingly easy to talk with and to work through different issues. He said that by and large, the bylaws are pretty good, but there are some changes that he's just in taking in his initial look, changes that he is going to recommend to how processes are done, things to really make it so that the zoning bylaws are more defensible and that they comport with state law. There are several areas where there's conflicts internal to the zoning bylaws, and there are several areas where there is conflicts to state law. In many cases, the state law has changed, the zoning has not updated accordingly. So he wants to go ahead and make those updates. He will likely present us with 2 different versions of the bylaws, of the zoning bylaws as he works through things, a red line copy to show the changes, and then he will recommend most likely a non-red line copy for town meeting, and he will help with the town meeting presentation, which will be an omnibus type of article to replace the zoning bylaw in its entirety with a replacement, unless it's broken out in some sort of different way, but that's his current anticipation of how he would most likely recommend that we present to that option. In terms of timing, I presented given the nature of this particular body where we like to be, I put this, persnickety with our language, which is a good thing. We like to be very exacting. We're likely to take a similar level of care with proposed changes to the language itself. And given Wakefield's interest in zoning, I expect there will probably be involvement by the public in most of those meetings. So the timeline that I set for him is probably 2 years that I expect that will probably be presenting at the May 2025 town meeting, possibly the November 2024 town meeting, but that is probably a bit aggressive given the amount of work that needs to be involved. And once we have things ready, it's a fairly long process to go from, once we take an affirmative vote on any potential changes, then it has to go before a planning board. Planning board has to schedule a public hearing, has to have a public hearing, and all of that has to happen at least 14, the first notice has to be at least 14 days before the town meeting itself, and then they have to take a vote to whether to recommend or counter recommend at town meeting itself. So there's a process that has to happen once we actually approve the bylaws. So given that it's March of 2023, I would be surprised if we have everything ready in time for fall of 2024. But spring of 2025, I think, is very likely. So that's the timeline that he and I discussed. He thinks that's very workable. He said some places try to do it very quickly, and I made it clear that's probably not going to be the case here. So that's where how I currently see the timing working. I think that these meetings with him will work out quite well. He seems to, again, be very workable. If anyone wants to reach out to him, you will have the ability to do so as a member of the committee, not a problem. And we can have additional meetings with him, members of his staff, as necessary. We do have a budget that has been allocated by town meeting, and if we blow through that entirety of the budget, including the contingency funds that are built into it, we will go to town meeting or finance committee to seek additional funding if necessary. But we'll cross that road at some point in the future if we need to. At this point, it's not currently anticipated that we'll need to go through that. So, Tom, do you have anything else to add in the conversations you've had with Attorney Bobrowski?
No, I think you'll all enjoy working with him. He is clearly the master of this subject matter statewide, all land use planning lawyers have to have his book in their library. It's required reading. And he's a nice guy too. You'll enjoy him.
So is it bedtime reading?
I don't think there's ever been anybody who read the book from beginning to end. That's impossible. You look in the index for the thing that you're trying to deal with right now. You absorb it and you close it as fast as possible and put it back on your shelf.
Or you hire his firm to deal with the issue?
Yeah.
Got it. Okay. Figured it's worth asking. If it's a great book, you know, maybe members of the committee would want to get it. It's bedtime reading. Might put them to sleep though.
But
So,
Dan, I wanted to ask, did you invite Brian McGrail to the hearings,
yes,
meetings? Oh, good.
I made a specific recommendation to him individually,
Yeah.
knowing that he has extreme amount of both personal and professional interest, as well as he's a subject matter expert on many aspects of the zoning itself.
Okay. Yeah. That's
And he's already responded that he expects to attend.
good.
So there have been a few other members of the community, but I made sure to reach directly out to the chamber, invite them along with the relevant boards. I was having a discussion today with the historical commission because they may have interest as well. We don't currently have a historical overlay, although that's been discussed in the past. So if there are others that you think may have interest, by all means, you can reach out to them, or you can send me a note and I can reach out to them as well. We want this process to be as inclusive as possible, since these are the zoning bylaws that are likely to affect this generation and to impact the next. Amongst the issues that have already been identified that will be significant is that when we do recodification, any existing non-conforming uses will be covered by the existing bylaws as of the date that they're adopted, as long as those are continuing uses. And so it can introduce some complexity for people, and we want to make sure that that complexity does not become problematic in and of itself. So if you hear of people who are interested in zoning issues, land use issues, please by all means extend invitations or let me know, and I'm happy to do so on behalf of the committee. So speaking of bylaws and conflicts and all that, brings us to the next item, which is E-Code 360. This is a challenging issue. As we've noted in several of our meetings here, there have been several bylaws that were not properly published on the E-Code website. And the ones that we've found, I think, have been corrected, which includes streets and sidewalks, snow and ice, and includes dogs and other animals. We've gone ahead and had those requested for updates. It also affected one of the others that's on tonight's agenda, which is the historical structures bylaw. And that brought us to a discussion with the historical commission. There was an issue with publication and the imposition of a fine that was not able to be levied properly because of that. I think those issues are largely addressed, although the publication issue sounds like it might need to still be addressed in a wider sense. Do you know of any of where things are on the publication need, just to make sure things are defensible?
When you say the publication need, what are you talking about?
I'm trying to remember the section of the.
Are you thinking of
MGL.
chapter 40, section 32, requiring that after a bylaw has been adopted by town meeting and approved by the Attorney General, you have to either publish or post copy of it?
Correct.
Yeah, okay.
So and that seems to have been an issue with these bylaws as well as others, just so that people have the ability to know what the bylaws are. It's hard to impose a bylaw if people don't have a reasonable way of finding out about the bylaw itself.
So I understand that Betsy is doing that with respect to these this bylaw amendment that had been mishandled by E-code previously.
Do we know if the other bylaws have been fully published? And I'm asking because there's been an ongoing issue. It amongst the ways that I think that we could do it is to actually just have a copy of the full bylaws, the paper copy in each of the precincts. We have, which we have municipal buildings in, I believe, 5 of the 7 precincts, and Dunkin' Donuts in the other 2, which sounds kind of funny, but that would count. I believe if we were to do that without having any significant cost, other than possibly buying coffee when we go to update the bylaw. So do we know if the town council CIL has authorized anything along those lines? Because we don't want to obviously republish the entirety of the bylaws. The town doesn't have enough to pay the item for that.
I don't think anybody knows to what extent each of the bylaws, which of course were adopted over the course of scores of years, were properly posted and published or published after adoption.
And that's why I'm just thinking if we do a posting of the entire book, I would think it would qualify if we put it in all of it. And then we don't have to worry about whether it was formally published or not, because it would be posted in each of the precincts.
Yep.
So what action items are necessary to ensure that happens?
I think we'd have to make sure that Betsy, the town clerk, that is, arranges to have a copy of all town bylaws placed in some public location in each of the 7 precincts.
Okay. So, we have, other than I believe it's precincts 1 and 7, which do have Dunkin' Donuts. If people have suggestions on where to put a copy of the bylaws so they're generally available and open to that, and I have no problems taking on the task of contacting Betsy and requesting her to put a copy of the bylaws themselves there, just so that we know what we're reviewing is enforceable.
Dan, may I ask, are there no public buildings in 1 and 7?
I'm not aware of public buildings that are open to the public.
Well, if they're public, they should be open to the public, right?
It depends on the type of building. Things like water towers and stuff aren't always open.
No, I mean like a typical office building or something like that.
Right. We have schools in most of the precincts, schools and public buildings, but I believe it's 1 and 7, which is over in the Montrose area. And I believe it's a section of Greenwood that do not currently have any public buildings there that are available. Otherwise, we could put a copy, I would presume, in each of the school libraries, and that would also qualify because the schools are open to the public or in the school offices. Anyone opposed to Dunkin' Donuts? Provided that they're amenable.
Well, I think that's my question. Why would they be amenable? I don't know.
I'm hoping if we ask nicely.
I mean, Greenwood is the fire department too tricky of it's a public building.
Tom, do you know which precincts it is specifically that don't have public buildings? I remember we went through this and there were 2 precincts that specifically didn't have public buildings. One of them being the area, I'm pretty sure it was precinct 1, the Montrose area where which is everything from Audubon Road to over towards the high school, but not including the high school itself. That area, there's no really accessible public buildings. So if anyone has thoughts on that, the actual precinct maps are available online. You go to the Secretary of State's office. You can see the precinct maps. I believe they're also available on the town website. But I'll take on an action item to contact Betsy to see what we can do to find a location within each precinct. If Dunkin' Donuts is not amenable, perhaps she can have a discussion with another business that is generally available. And part of the reason for thinking Dunkin' Donuts is that they are also tend to have extensive hours. So it has been an issue, but I'm hoping that this will help resolve those issues, because it seems like the issues have really been with getting things online as opposed to getting things submitted to the Attorney General. It seems like the submissions to the Attorney General were correct. Is that your understanding, Tom?
Yes.
So if anyone notices other bylaws that appear to be incorrect from prior things that you may recall, please, again, let me know, let Tom know, let Steve Mayo know. We will do whatever research is necessary and get it corrected as appropriate. Because it's important that people have access to the bylaws themselves. That's how people know what's going on, both us as well as others. So with that, last thing I want to mention is that when we're doing zoning recodification for those meetings, which will probably be about every other meeting going forward, or one meeting a month, for those meetings, we will probably focus exclusively on zoning. And then for the other meetings, we'll continue focusing on the other bylaws. So meetings will have a focus of either zoning or non-zoning. The good news is we've gotten through the hardest of the general bylaws to date. And so I don't think we'll have a problem timing wise of getting everything done with the time that we're looking at. So with that said, time to begin having fun of going over bylaws. We have a few open issues, and the open issues, I'm going to share screen here. There we go. I can still see everyone. Excellent. So first of the issues is 178, 8, and 9. These have been properly updated. This is snow and ice. Since our last few meetings, we have actually had several of experiences dealing with snow and ice. I hope no one has slipped, fallen, or had injuries with it. We've also had some snow days, and for those of us with children, they've probably been delighted by the concept of snow days, or teachers. For the rest of us, it tends to be a mess to clean up, but cleaning up is something that becomes a part of the bylaw itself and really important. So just in terms of components, wasn't sure if people had heard of any feedback. I don't think we've had any negative enforcement. None that I'm aware of, where we've had the DPW have to issue any sort of ticketing, or even had the police do any ticketing with any of the storms most recently. I have seen people where they have been clearing snow into public ways inappropriately, but it seems to have been pretty minor and cleaned up in a pretty quick way for the few times that I've seen it. Thoughts? Otherwise, we'll leave this one, I think, as is for now. If it comes up again, this is March, if you hear anything, please let me know. We can add it to a meeting in April. Otherwise, we'll probably just leave this bylaw as it is. We've certainly had given the opportunity for it to be reviewed in depth. This brings us over to Chapter 36 on meetings. Again, something that's been open. I've not heard back from the town moderator on different suggestions on how to have changes. I've also reached out to the Commission on Disabilities and have not heard anything definitive from them on certain disability related issues. But it's something that I'm just going to leave on the agenda, at least through the next town meeting, to see if people have additional thoughts. Any questions, feedback? Quiet today. Okay, this brings us over to dogs and other animals. Last time we reviewed this information had not been updated correctly. It has since been updated. Specifically, things such as the dog parks have been added, the fines have been corrected. I have not heard any negative feedback directly on the current wording as published, but it has been published for that long on any of these changes. So among the changes that was added was things such as the concept of a dog park has been specifically added. For those of you who have dogs, we do have a dog park, the Peter May Dog Park over on Main Street. Tends to have a lot of friendly dogs there. Occasionally mine goes as well. Although if he hears me talking about it on Zoom, he'll probably be coming here and asking. Tom, you may have that same issue. And I suspect that is also the case there. So dogs tend to know certain words, and if you cue on those words, even in a Zoom meeting, if you've got speakers, they'll hear it. I'll refrain from using some of those words right now, so we don't have to let the dogs out, as the song goes. Any questions or feedback on chapter 104? Okay, moving on. Go ahead. You're on mute.
Sorry, we talked a lot about it last time. I think that looks good now that it's published too.
And this brings us over to chapter 112, which we had just gotten ready to begin. This is the E911 telephone system. It's an old bylaw, although I've not heard any changes that have been requested by the police chief or fire department on this. So there were some specific changes, such as the changes to the charges for false calls. If someone makes an intentionally false call to 911, this is really if there are a calls through alarm companies and so forth, that there is the ability to have fines and fees collected. This is done, I believe, in practice on a fiscal year basis, and it does reset. So the first caller report warning is issued, and I believe it resets every fiscal year. Tom, do you know if that's the case?
No, I don't know.
Otherwise, other changes that had been made to this is that there is an appeals board. The alarm appeals board, I believe, is currently the town council, and the town council is actually appointing themselves. So you have the ability to have something appealed if someone were to get a charge, they can go to the town council and ask for it. Any questions, thoughts? People are being very quiet today. Chapter 119, fees. Money. I've intentionally not gone to the town clerk, building department, and other departments to ask about fees. And my reasoning on this is I want this board to determine if we want to reach out to them to request a review of the fees, or to use a discussion from chapter 104, let sleeping dogs lie, where they may. These are the fees that are specifically outlined. Some of these had been updated in specific years, such as there was a change in 2013 for people who were filing a certificate, a DBA certificate, doing business in other components. Otherwise, the fees themselves tend to be very modest. And when fees tend to come up as a matter of practice, it tends to be done as a comparative to other communities as opposed to the cost. The cost in practice can almost always be justified to be higher than what they currently are, because the cost of doing business and operating the town clerk's office and building department are significant. This really comes as a matter of, these are our services that need to be provided, and there's a fee. If we determine that we want to request and update the fees to the town clerk, we certainly can, and or the building department, or we can choose not to address the issue and let them raise the issue directly at that time. So with that, there's a lot of different fees that people can have, some of which are not in practice, such as we don't actually have a voter's card in this town, but you could request one for $2. I'm not sure what it would contain, but you can request it. If you need a birth certificate, $10, and so forth. Marriage certificate, $10. Please note, if you need a divorce certificate, that's not issued by the town. You can get married here, you can get born here, but the others, you can't. If you need to record a power of attorney, $5. If you're actually an attorney, full separate issue. So any thoughts on any of these fees, reason to bring up the issue, or we can choose not to?
My only thought, and I like keeping them small, because I don't think the purpose of these kind of requests is necessarily to make money. I don't think we want to have a new parent, you know, or get someone getting a death certificate, cough over a lot of money. My only question is like the $2 ones. To me, it seems like I almost think a $5 minimum makes sense, but that's just maybe because it's an abstract copy. What is an abstract copy, Tom?
So with a lot of these, they come right out of the statutes, which haven't been changed.
Oh, okay, got it.
Yeah.
No worries then. I rescind my comment.
And Dan, my own 2 cents is I'd let sleeping dogs lie. Every time any fees are increased at town meetings, somebody gets up and expresses resentment. You're right that as a legal matter, I'm sure we'd have no problem justifying any kind of increase that we proposed, because this kind of proof is so malleable. But really, there is supposed to be a distinction between a fundraising technique, which is a tax, and a fee, which is just supposed to be, you get paid no more than you need to render the service. So unless we have departments coming to us saying, hey, we're going broke here because we're not allowed to charge the true cost of the service, I'd be inclined to, again, let sleeping dogs lie.
Others' thoughts, opinions?
No, I agree. I mean, it
I
sounds
agree.
like the small fees are probably just for like paper, stuff like, $2 for paper, I guess. I mean, they're working in the office anyways, right? If you're making a copy, just sounds like it's just a miscellaneous small fee, it sounds like to me.
I agree.
So keep it all. Thank you.
Okay, so moving on. Other fees that had been examined were registration of underground storage tanks. I think these are predominantly the fuel tanks that are used largely at filling stations, but for people who have who have other storage tanks for oil or other items that need to be registered, there are fees. I think there are some businesses that may have some of these, but besides the few gas stations, I'm not aware of many that are registered. Tom, do you know if there's any? And
That's right. I don't know.
and again, I would recommend that we just kind of leave these issues, but I want to make sure in doing due diligence, we give anyone who has if anyone wants to visit these, we have the ability to do so. We also have the fees for sealer of weights and measures. These are to validate various weights, and you may see these on things such as pumps at gas stations and other. If you go to farmland, you'll actually see these on their scales. So there's a variety of fees. Many of these were actually updated in 2018. Some of these fees I don't think actually have been have actually been needed in quite a while. I don't think we actually have any entertainment licenses with electronic devices. That's really like video poker type of thing. I don't think we have any currently in the town that I'm aware of.
It's TVs too. It's TVs, Dan.
Okay.
So I know that the town council looked at these fees, compared them to other towns not that long ago. I was on the board, but I think it was towards the end of my tenure. And I think these fees are very appropriate.
Others' thoughts?
Yeah, Dan, this is Bob. I can't remember. A lot of these were amended by the last bylaw review committee that you and I sat on, because I'm looking at these dates of May 2018. Do you remember? We didn't do that on our own. Didn't somebody come to us and recommend the changes in the fees? I just can't remember which body came to us with the recommended changes.
Town council.
Town council for this particular section. Some of them
Okay.
came from different bodies, but this section came from the town council.
Okay, thanks.
We did have a heated discussion, which you may or may not remember, on the fortune tellers as to whether they knew that the fee was going to be changed.
Okay.
Oh my God, Steve Mayo makes that joke every single year too. So they're like dad jokes.
Some things just you have to go with. It's just like if there's an in holder license, is there an out holder? You have an in holder, but no out houses. Okay. So building permit fees are actually set differently. The fee schedule itself was moved out of the bylaw for every line. It is on file with the town clerk. It has not been updated in a few years. It was updated. The actual language of moving it out happened in 2018. The actual last updates that I recall were in 2016. I don't recommend, unless the building department comes back to us. They are a revenue source. You'll hear about them at every town meeting as one of the forms of miscellaneous income. That's where these fees come from. But I don't think on our own we should necessarily go ahead and request or recommend a change without the building department coming to us. But again, want to leave that to the committee to decide. Miscellaneous fees. Most of these fees were specifically not changed. The only one that was changed in 2018 was at the oil burner, which I think previously was like $5 or $10. It was very, very small. These are our fees for inspections, and these are mostly done by the actual fire department. Again, the idea is to keep the fees very minimal, usually below the cost of the service itself, to encourage compliance so that people actually do get the reviews. So that if someone wants to have their smoke detectors reviewed, it costs $10. If it's more than $10 or it's commercial building, it's $25. The idea being that these fees are deliberately very low, largely subsidized by taxes, and other revenue streams so that there is compliance. That was the idea in the past. If someone wants to see any of these individual fees reviewed, we certainly can do it. I'm not aware of the last time there was a tar kettle permit pulled. I'm not sure if that was done with others or not. I believe they reserved that only for town councilors. Thoughts, recommendations? I'm going to scroll down just to bring all these on screen.
I think Tom's right with fees, that if you start messing with fees, unless it's appropriate or we're far different from neighboring communities and can articulate a reason, it just opens up a can of worms.
I also think your rationale of encouraging compliance makes a lot of sense. So I think it makes sense to leave these.
The only one I would like to potentially review is tar permit, just so that people can't come after, say, bylaw review committee members for $25 with tar and feathers, and say that we're doing things. But changing that might encourage it. Okay, and then the fees non-enumerated is just for anything that's not listed here. It's held elsewhere. This will effectively, my understanding is it allows other bodies to assess fees as may be appropriate. They are, if a bylaw is required by state law, we actually have a bylaw that then encompasses it, kind of a catch-all. So that would be fees by like the recreation department and so forth, is my understanding what that is for. Tom, is that an accurate representation of 119.5?
I'm really not sure that we, I think it means that to whatever extent we have the right outside of town meeting to set fees, we're reserving that right. But that's just restating the law. So I don't think this adds, or I don't think it adds anything.
Okay. And probably is not worth removing either.
No.
With that, moving on, chapter 126. So historic structures. As I mentioned earlier in the meeting, I did contact the Historical Commission and invited them, and any members who wish to join this meeting, they're welcome to do so and contribute. This is the initial discussion of this particular bylaw. It can certainly come up if members from the Historical Commission or the commission as a whole has feedback. They didn't have any initial feedback as this had just been republished. The initial thoughts is that we may want to take a look at the language. It might be a little bit awkward, but there wasn't any major changes initially proposed. So the purpose of this bylaw is to protect the historic structures. It does not prohibit them from getting demolished. It does allow them for there to be a delay. So 126.1, which has not actually been changed in a while, just tries to again get to that specific piece of information as to the purpose itself.
Dan, is there a date, like a year for this? Is it another chapter? What's considered historic? Like, is it past 1900 or 1890 or?
So what's actually defined as historic is is actually defined by the Massachusetts Historical Commission, and the list is maintained by the building inspector. So there are a couple of ways that it can be added. It can be designated specifically by the Historical Commission on their own. It can be designated by the Massachusetts Historical Commission of Buildings. And it can also be done if it is on the National Historic Register. The most significant aspect of this is any significant building which the commission determines should be preserved rather than be demolished. So they effectively reserve the right to allocate any parcel in any building in the town as historic should they need to. But again, it doesn't prevent demolition, it just delays it.
Mhm.
So significant building, anything that's listed on the National Historic Register or has been listed on the inventory. Is that a fairly accurate representation, Tom?
Yep, that's true.
For what it's worth, I will disclose that the property that I own and live in and that I'm speaking to you from is actually listed on the National Historic Register. So it is property that has covered and was actually saved by this bylaw, a predecessor to it in recodification. So the bylaw does work. And in that sense, I'm a big fan of having a demolition delay. So in 1964, there was a demolition delay permit requested, and the prior owners of this property actually bought it for the list price at that time and saved it. And then I wound up buying it many years later and have continued the restoration. So the idea behind this bylaw can actually work in practice. So if there's a application for demolition of a listed significant building, again, the list of buildings is available at the building department. Anyone can check to see what that list is. I'm not aware whether it's online or not. Many aspects of the building department are not yet online, although more and more services from the building department are being moved online. So if a building is on the list itself, a copy shall be submitted to the commission and the permit shall not be issued. The commission shall then, within 30 days of receiving it, have a hearing. They have to publish the hearing itself and mail a copy to the property owners that abut the property itself. If the commission determines that it would not be detrimental, they shall notify it within 10 days, in which case the building inspector can then issue the demolition permit. If they do determine that the demolition would be detrimental, then the building shall be considered preferably saved, in which case it has to be at least 6 months before the demolition can actually occur. And then during that time, the commission is satisfied there's no reasonable likelihood that either the owner or some other person is willing to purchase, preserve, rehabilitate, or restore the building, they can waive it. And that they're satisfied that if for at least 6 months, the owner has made continuing and reasonable efforts to locate a purchaser. The idea behind this is that a person can't just go ahead and say, okay, I want to demolish this building, so I'm going to list a building that might have a realistic value of say $200,000 and list it for $4 million. That would not be necessarily deemed a reasonable bona fide way of doing it. Or if they say that they're willing to sell it but don't actually advertise in any way, shape, or form or list the property, again, the commission can continue the delay itself. The idea is that someone has to make the ability for property to be saved. And again, I know personally that this can work. If the property is not sold in that time, then the demolition permit shall be issued. G is probably actually among the most significant aspects of this. No permit for erection of a new structure on a site of an existing significant building may be issued prior to the issuance of a permit for demolition. This language is really significant because this means that even if someone goes ahead and just demolishes a building, or they let it go in such repair and they don't get a demolition permit, they can't get a building permit. Without a building permit, they can't get an occupancy permit, and the building and the property realistically can't be sold with a clear title. So this becomes actually very significant language, is my understanding of it, for that reason. Is that a reasonable interpretation, Tom, in its application?
Yeah, that's the chokehold that we have, is the refusal to issue a new building permit. Yeah.
There are exceptions, and one that unfortunately did have to be used since this bylaw was looked at most recently, and that's emergency demolition. So if there is a need for emergency demolition, it can be done. That had to be done to what was the First Baptist Church, where the building was no longer structurally sound. An emergency demolition permit did have to be issued, even though that building was definitely deemed historic in nature. You may recall the horrific fire that occurred there in late 2018. Enforcement. This was changed. This was the subject of some of the recent issues. This part was just added over the course of the last couple of weeks to E-code. The commission and the building inspector are specifically authorized to institute any and all actions as necessary to obtain compliance, which means that they can go ahead and actually require a building to be effectively rebuilt. The owner who demolishes it shall be subject to a fine of $300 per day. That for just a simple fine of $250, which was the prior bylaw, it was often viewed as a cost of doing business. You pay $250, you can do it without a permit, so be it. Now it's $300 per day, and that's continuing fines. So that becomes, again, very significant teeth, because not only will you not get a building permit, but you have to actually pay this fine. That's enough that it doesn't take very long before there's enough money in fines to make it worthwhile for the town to ask Tom to take action. Someone were to have $300 in fines, the town may not take action. If they have $3,000 or $30,000, they probably will. If a significant building is demolished without a permit having been issued, no building permit shall be issued for at least 2 years from the day of demolition on the subject parcel of land or adjoining parcels of land under common ownership or control, unless the permit is for the faithful restoration restored. This is new. This was specifically designed so that someone doesn't demolish on one parcel just to build on the next parcel. So you don't get people buying 2 parcels of land, demolishing a property on one, and then requesting a variance for a larger property, say to the ZBA, saying that, oh, we're going to leave the next lot vacant. So the idea here is that it actually specifically prohibits a building permit for a period of 2 years, long enough that it should be enough of a deterrent of having people just do an illegal demolition, potentially have fines, and not be able to do anything for a couple of years, still having to pay taxes on all of that. I don't think that we've actually had the opportunity to use this language yet that I'm aware of, but I think that this would be very helpful. Joe, you sit on the ZBA as well. Does this language seem like it would be helpful in determining if someone were to request relief through the ZBA of a zoning issue? If they were to
Yeah,
have
I mean,
done.
it hasn't come up since I've been on, but yeah.
Others' thoughts?
I think it looks good.
Again, hopefully we won't have to have this situation, but the idea is that if there was a designation, it would prevent different components. So as an example of how this could be used, I don't expect that it would be, is that if the American Mutual building were deemed significant and it would be demolished without a permit, then it could implement a 2-year delay before permits could be issued on that land or adjoining land for other construction. So that would be an example of where that could affect the outcome of a project. Again, the idea is we want to have good developers who work with the town, but there are places where there have been developers who have just deemed demolition as cost of doing business. The last section is if any part is deemed severable, not a problem. Any questions, thoughts? I think that if we get feedback from the historical commission or any of the members, we will certainly re-add this to an agenda at that time. Otherwise, I think the recommendation that came from Nancy Bertrand, the chair, was we just kind of wait and see, live with the language, see what changes may need to come up. But the idea really is to protect the town, the character of the town as much as possible without making it prohibitive. Amongst the things that are not in this bylaws, we do not have a historic district. We do not have a permanent ban on demolition. So there are other towns have more restrictive bylaws in this nature. Ours is the only prohibition is specifically on demolition. Otherwise, people can do with their properties whatever is otherwise legal. Questions, thoughts? Okay, with that, we've actually gotten through that entire section of the agenda. Upcoming dates, we've got a few different dates coming up. The next meeting will be in 2 weeks on Monday, March 20th. That's the meeting with Attorney Bobrowski. Plan on that being a 2-hour meeting, 7 to 9 by Zoom. He lives, I believe, in Concord, so he appreciates the fact that it'll be by Zoom. You won't have to fight traffic. At some point, we're likely to go to hybrid meetings. There has been money allocated to implement hybrid meeting capability. When that happens, we will likely have the opportunity to meet Attorney Bobrowski in person. Next meeting would likely be April 3rd, Monday, April 3rd at 7 p.m. That's the first Monday in April. Any issues with that meeting date?
Nope.
And we'll plan on Monday, April 3rd, probably being a meeting to continue on with the general bylaws. We'll certainly, I'm sure, have a discussion since it'll be our first meeting after meeting Attorney Bobrowski, just how that process went, but then we'll continue on with the next several sections. Next item up, we've got town vote on town meeting action on this coming Saturday, March 11th at Galvin Middle School. If you haven't voted, please go ahead and do so. You can vote early over at Town Hall. I encourage everyone, get your vote out, make your opinion heard. This is on the Proposition 2.5 debt exclusion for a replacement high school to replace the Wakefield Memorial High School. So this Saturday, Galvin Middle School is for in-person voting. Before that at Town Hall.
And I might be wrong, but I thought Betsy said there wasn't early voting for this. There was absentee ballots. There was mail-in voting, but I don't know that there's in-person.
It's absentee balloting, but you can do the absentee balloting while you're at the town.
So you can go to Town Hall and do the absentee. Okay.
Correct.
Got it.
It's not technically early voting. You are correct from a technical perspective.
I just remember her saying that, but what you're saying makes perfect sense. Sounds good.
Which is the way that it's been done for many years. You can take your absentee ballot, mark it, and then effectively turn it in. But please make sure everyone has the opportunity. If you have the ability to vote, please do so. We have our town meeting. Annual town meeting is set for Monday, May 15th. Please put it on your calendars. As a member of a town appointed board, we are each expected to be there. We're required by town charter to be there. In addition, we're going to have several items on the warrant. I have no idea at this point how many items in total will be on the warrant. After this meeting, I will submit the articles that we have approved, since we've now approved the minutes. I'll approve all of those, send all of those items to the town council for inclusion on the warrant itself. As a follow-up to that, at the next meeting of the planning board, which is expected in about another week or so, they're expected to advance the street numbering bylaw that we had recommended for them at their last meeting. They didn't express any concerns with it. They just wanted to set it up for another meeting so that they could actually have a formal vote on it. And I think they may open it up for, again, public comment. If anyone wants to show up, you're encouraged to do so. So town meeting is Monday, May 15th, 7 p.m. Galvin Middle School. Please be there. If you can't be there for any reason, please send me an email to either the town email or my personal email that I use, either one so that we can record with a reason that you are not present and you have a valid reason, whatever that reason may be. That's just so that we have applicability, and we're trying to be compliant with the town charter. Any other items?
How are we counted when we just go, when we do attend, like as part of the committee?
One by one is the short answer. With a little bit of snark in there, but we are individuals. If you speak on any of these items, it is recommended that you then state you are a member of the bylaw review committee for any item that we are either sponsoring or discussion on an item that we've had deliberation. It's not mandatory that you do so, but it is recommended that you do so. As long as it's an item that we've discussed, to state that you are a member of the bylaw review committee is certainly appropriate. For the items that we're sponsoring, I will get up and actually do the sponsoring, which will basically state we've had meetings, we've ratified, we recommend the article itself. I will get up for the planning board article and state that as a body we've formally endorsed their article. Will not be in the same way as a recommendation that's done by the finance committee or planning board by charter, since those are handled a little bit differently, but you'll hear that as well. So really good question. If it's an item that is separate, such as budget or other component, you can just get up and state your name and address. You don't, for those items, you are not obligated to state that you're a member of the bylaw review committee. You can, but it's not necessarily applicable to those items.
Okay.
If anyone else has other words of advice or recommendations on how to address it, that's the way that I've seen it addressed by practice over many years. Really good question. We still only get one vote. Other questions, items, things that you'd like to see added to future agenda items? Okay, with that.
I just wanted to ask quickly, is this Ref 10 someone? This other participant?
They don't have it likely is a person. I'm going to stop sharing here. The person is not showing that they have a camera or a microphone available. So I'm not sure who that is. If they wish to rename, they're welcome to do so, but it's not required.
Okay. Do I need to include it in the minutes that they joined?
No. They're unless they're a member that we don't know about, they have not participated.
Okay.
Otherwise, before we adjourn, like to thank you, Lucy, for taking minutes. Much appreciated. When you have them done, feel free to put them into the Dropbox folder. If you're not sure how to do that, email it to me, and I will go ahead and take care of that. And then we will have that as one of the items on our meeting for Monday, March 20th. I've already let Attorney Bobrowski know we open our meetings typically by approving minutes. He does not have a problem. Since there's usually not much time. If it looks like there's significant changes, we'll defer it to another meeting. But I'm quite confident in your ability, Lucy, to do minutes that won't require any significant changes that won't be able to be handled at that meeting if necessary. So with that, we haven't heard from a few people. So get ready on your unmutes. Your unmute button quickly. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Tim is moving that we adjourn. Who wants to second that motion that has not spoken much this meeting?
Second.
Kevin wins for seconding. Catherine is staying quiet. Yes, I'm just picking on you, Catherine, because I can. So it is one of the things. Joe's smiling. Lucy has had the privilege of doing minutes and has been able to join us from multiple multiple venues. So we've had a lot of going on in this meeting. Appreciate everyone joining us as we get ready to take the final vote. So we have a motion to adjourn on the table, made by Tim, seconded by Kevin. Any discussion on the motion? With that, we will take a roll call in the order in which I see you on the screen. Joe,
Yes.
Kevin,
Yes.
Tim,
Yes.
Catherine,
Yes.
Anne,
Yes.
Lucy,
Yes.
and I vote in the affirmative. And with that, we have unanimous vote to adjourn. Meeting is adjourned at 8:08. Thank you, everyone, and we'll see you in 2 weeks.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
Good night.